Dictation will start in 5 seconds. Start. The present matter arises out of a civil dispute between the parties regarding the enforcement of certain contractual obligations and the alleged breach thereof. Stop. It is the case of the plaintiff that a valid and binding agreement was executed between the parties on the 15th day of June, whereby the defendant undertook to perform specific duties within a stipulated period. Stop. However, it has been contended that the defendant failed to discharge the said obligations in a timely manner, thereby causing substantial loss and inconvenience to the plaintiff and adversely affecting the business interests of the plaintiff in multiple respects. Stop. Learned counsel appearing on behalf of the plaintiff submitted that despite repeated requests, reminders, and formal communications issued from time to time, the defendant did not take any effective or concrete steps to comply with the terms and conditions of the agreement. Stop. It was further argued that the conduct of the defendant clearly demonstrates negligence, inaction, and lack of bona fide intention to fulfill the contractual commitments undertaken. Stop. On the other hand, the learned counsel for the defendant opposed the submissions and contended that the delay, if any, was caused due to circumstances beyond the reasonable control of the defendant and therefore no liability can be fastened upon him in the eyes of law. Stop. This court has carefully considered the rival submissions advanced by both the parties and has also perused the entire material available on record. Stop. The primary issue that arises for determination is whether the defendant has committed a breach of the terms and conditions of the agreement and whether the plaintiff is entitled to the relief as claimed in the plaint. Stop. It is well settled law that in order to establish breach of contract, the aggrieved party must prove that there existed a valid agreement, that the terms thereof were clear, certain, and enforceable, and that the other party failed to perform its obligations without any lawful or justifiable excuse. Stop. Upon parties is not in dispute and stands duly proved. Stop. The correspondence exchanged between the parties also clearly indicates that the defendant was fully aware of the obligations cast upon him under the agreement. Stop. However, there is nothing substantial on record to show that the defendant took reasonable or diligent steps to perform the same within the stipulated period. Stop. The explanation offered by the defendant does not inspire confidence and cannot be accepted as a valid or sufficient defense in the eyes of law. Stop. In view of the aforesaid discussion and findings, this court is of the considered opinion that the plaintiff has been able to successfully establish a clear and unequivocal case of breach or contract on the part of the defendant. Stop. Accordingly, the plaintiff is entitled to appropriate and reasonable relief in accordance with law. Stop. The defendant is hereby directed to compensate the plaintiff for the losses suffered as a direct consequence of the breach. Stop. No order as to costs is made in the facts and circumstances of the present case. Stop.